Whenever.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American Evangelical Church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Join us for these episodes live on our Evangelicalish YouTube page on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Let's journey together.
All right, everybody, welcome to Evangelicalish. Glad you're with us. I'm Paul.
I'm April.
And I'm Jeremy.
I was waiting to see who would jump in second on that one. That's very cool. Well, did you guys have a good 4th of July weekend? It felt like a little bit of a weird 4th of July. And of course, we had tragedy, but even just kind of our relationship with America is kind of weird. But how was the 4th for you guys?
It was fun. I mean, it was a fun 3-day weekend. Monday.
I celebrated smoking pork ribs. It was the pork rib holiday is what it was. And so I did that. Was there something else?
I saw your video, Jeremy.
My video? Which one?
I saw your TikTok on I'm not so happy with America, but I like these ribs.
No, not real thrilled with America right now, but these ribs though. No. I've jokingly been telling people I ate ribs on Monday, but was there something else happening? Was there something else going on? I think I'm less than thrilled with the United States right now. So it was nice to be with, I've been sharing with everybody. It's nice to be with family and have a day off together, and the kid, we got all the cousins together and swam in the pool, but it was kind of it was just an opportunity because everybody was off work.
I'll say I haven't really felt thrilled about the 4th for several years now. I feel like when I deconstructed evangelicalism, I also deconstructed patriotism because there's a lot of hard truths about America that they don't teach in school, kids.
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's been really tough just to, and the deeper you go into some of the nonsense and the more insane and chaotic the country gets, it's just, you just become less and less interested in being star-spangled excited. So
it says a lot about our religion, doesn't it, when our deconstruction of our faith beliefs also deconstructs our patriotism.
Lecrae actually tweeted about that today. He was like, every time I leave the country, I'm always radically reminded that we have intertwined our Christianity with our politics. And he's like, and America does that like no one else, to its detriment, is basically what he was saying, and paraphrasing, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think that has become the glaringly obvious thing for those in the deconstruction, reconstruction, new worldview space is just how intertangled nationalism and Christianity have been, and so it's a glorious thing on the other side.
But also when you see the people that are like gun ho. Like literally gun ho for America, the ones with all the flags and the.
Did you say gun hos?
Gun ho, like gun ho.
Gun ho.
It's gun ho. That are real gun ho for
I like it.
The gun hose.
But anyway,
gun hose.
I didn't say gun hos. I said people who are gun ho.
Gung ho.
I think the saying is gung ho. Gung ho.
Gung ho. It's not gun.
Oh my gosh, I've always.
I hope we're not mansplaining that to you, but I think it is.
I mean, borderline. But I really did think it was gun ho until today.
That's not mansplaining. We just this is a friendly conversation amongst friends.
I'm just joking. Jeez.
By the way, I love the term gun ho. I am like that.
Gun ho makes more sense.
These people are so gun ho. Yeah.
See, my brother. It must have been how we were raised, because my brother in the comments thought it was gun ho too.
I thought you were doing it on purpose. I thought it was.
I wish I like in hindsight, I would have played it off like I was doing it on purpose. But
I think that's
if I'm
hilarious.
being honest, I genuinely thought it was
No, it's gun ho now. Somebody just commented. Paul just said it's gun ho now. It is gun ho now.
It is gun ho.
It is gun ho now. Yes.
I mean, it's just I love it. It's like you all are a bunch of gun hoes. That's all there is.
Gun ho for America.
Yeah, you guys are so gun ho for America. I love how we just took like a common everyday phrase and just completely just changed it right here for the rest of the world.
You're welcome, everybody.
Yes, America. We'll be on next week.
Mm-hmm.
All right, as scintillating as that convo is.
To our guest, though.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
By the way, we do want to mark this is the start of what, season 8 for us?
Oh, I think last was we might be season 9.
Sure.
Can we just throw out we're keeping track of the seasons? It's
okay.
They're too many.
I feel like we're going to be at season 100, by episode 100 basically.
I know.
It's kind of how it feels some days.
All right, we're back from a 2-week break and we're starting with a bang because we have an awesome guest today. If you've seen Rev Brandan on social media, TikTok, he's an amazing guy who was really platformed at a very young age, a progressive activist in the church, a theologian, LGBTQI plus activist, and has been involved in some really cool things, including getting Southern Baptists to talk to LGBTQ plus movement leaders and just incredible stuff. And so we're really privileged to have Brandan Robertson, otherwise known as Rev Brandan, with us today. Welcome to the show, Rev Brandan.
Thanks so much. It's so good to be with all of you.
Super cool. I think we're all TikTok fanning a little bit on you being here today.
I definitely am.
Likewise.
I've been a big Rev Brandan fan for a hot minute. So
I love these connections of us TikTok deconstructionist preacher types. It's so amazing. It feels like we have a community, even though we've never met virtually before. So I love it.
And he's not a gun ho. So there you go.
Not gun ho.
Not gun ho. So
I endorse that fully, though. Gun ho is the way to go. So
yeah, gun ho is the way to go. That's a shirt.
I mean, it's really true though. When I started getting on TikTok, I saw this crazy pastor from Oklahoma and this creative April Joy from Tennessee and Rev Brandan. You guys were some of the first that I saw, and Brandan, just like following you and following your history, it's really fascinating some of the circles you've been able to move in. And then like you stepped away from that for a whole lot of reasons. Just tell us a little bit of that history of the deconstruction of your beliefs after being, like I said, sort of platformed in that evangelical space. What was it like and what drove you to sort of step out of that space?
Yeah, it's been a wild journey, but I feel like all of our journeys have been wild in different ways. For me, I wasn't raised religious or anything, but I started going to a fundamentalist Baptist church with my neighbors when I was 12 and had a conversion experience, got saved. And really, I mean, I was transformed both by this fundamentalist community that welcomed me and made me feel like I was loved and wanted, which I didn't feel very much in other places in my life. And within a few months of being in that community and kind of witnessing the dynamics of church for the first time, I felt like I was getting a calling to be a pastor. And so really from 12 years old to today, I just turned 30, I've been aiming for being a pastor, living into this calling of pastoral ministry. And to kind of touch on what you just brought up, Paul, essentially by the time I was 16, I ended up transitioning to a evangelical megachurch. I was kind of taken on as the protege of, it was a Willow Creek Association pastor, and they started letting me preach to 6,000 people at 16 years old. And from there, they sent me off to Bible college, and I went to Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. And it was really those 4 years at Moody. If you know anything about that school, it's in the heart of downtown Chicago. So I would hear fundamentalist theology in the classroom, and then I'd walk out onto the street, and my theology and reality would continually clash. I would meet Muslims or gay people or non-religious people and find out that they weren't the demonic antichrist type folks that my doctrine told me they were. And that really started to mess with me in profound ways and eventually sparked the deconstruction journey.
Nice. Wow. Did you, so I've seen some of your story in like 60-second clips on TikTok. But another fun fact about you is that you are gay as well.
Yeah.
When did you know that when you were in, like, when did you have that realization, and were you still in evangelical circles when you did?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I remember distinctly this very strange memory. I used to sneak into our Baptist church sanctuary all the time when nobody was around, and like preach and do stuff. And I remember one day sneaking into this dark sanctuary and opening up the Bible, and it must have been First Corinthians. And I saw the word homosexuality in the Bible, and for some reason it caught my eye, and I was so surprised that that word was there. And for some reason I knew it was talking about me, and this was like right at the beginning of puberty. And so I think my earliest memories of being gay are of this sense of homophobia and shame based on the religion I joined. And I tried to date women during high school. When I went off to college, I thought I'd kind of I made a covenant with God where I said, if I go to Moody, if I go to study to be a pastor, of course God's going to take away this sin struggle, right? I'm giving my life to him. And really it was the 4 years at Moody that solidified for me, after doing conversion therapy for a year, after walking with professors who were trying to help me theologically overcome my same-sex attraction. It became clear that there was no changing this. And that led me on a journey of studying, which I've now spent the last 8 years really focused on studying the ancient first century Greco-Roman world and what the Bible actually says about sexuality and gender. And after a long and painful process of getting kicked out of evangelicalism very publicly after I graduated from Moody, I was able to reconcile my faith and sexuality. And it kind of is my crusade, so to speak. I just think there's so much terrible theology out there, and so many uninformed pastors that are talking about these things but know nothing about the world of the Bible or these words or sexuality and gender, and that's causing irreparable harm to thousands of people.
So were you working and involved in like independent fundamental Baptist churches at the time? Like, I mean, I'm very familiar with that. I grew up Southern Baptist, but it was very, very fundamentally driven, and so, you see all these guys like, I mean, just, there's all these characters that we see kind of making the rounds on social media, the Nathan Ragers of the world, the Steven Andersons, and, and people like that. So, I find it really fascinating you talking about, kind of how those worlds collided, and that resonates a ton with me, because I had a very similar experience where I was working with some other folks, like when I was coaching and teaching, and they were not Christians. They were very progressive. And I was like, oh man, these people like have amazing marriages and families, and like I love these students. And, so what was it like for you? Kind of like, I know you kind of briefly just said, like, you went to Moody, that 4 years kind of vaulted you into kind of a new mindset, but kind of maybe an example or two of like where those things, like where the rubber really met the road, like you walk out, you connect with somebody, and it, those things just come head on like trains on a track. I mean, were there some like very specific moments that happened for you?
Yeah, I think there were probably 3 key moments in that season of my life. Well, the first thing I'll say is I left the independent fundamentalist church when I was 12, or not 12, when I got to be 16. I ended up being kicked out of that church because I started listening to Mark Driscoll, and they considered they considered him a heretic, but I loved him because he was like everything we believed but cool.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. No, he was definitely the cool one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to drink and smoke and cuss and all of those things. And so I was like, okay, I started bringing Mark Driscoll into the youth group, and I was literally kicked out. They said, this is heretical. This is dangerous. You're not welcome here, which led me to this Willow Creek Association mega church in Maryland, where I'm from. And from that point forward, my entire conception of Christianity has always been within the context of mega churches. It's always been in the context of pastors with book deals and radio shows and traveling around on private jets and all of that stuff. That was my understanding of Christianity. And so when I got to Moody, even as I was very conservative when I entered in, I started immediately writing a blog called Evangelical. I started a radio show on Moody Campus Radio called The Bridge. And I really wanted to explore how differing theologies related to the true gospel that we had. And so I started doing all this very public stuff. And that was what first got me a lot of backlash from my evangelical community. I would interview people on our radio show like N.T. Wright or even Tim Keller. Okay. And for Moody, that was a step too far. And so freshman year, got called into the dean's office and they said, what are you doing putting these people on our campus radio station? Like, this is dangerous stuff. You shouldn't be talking to them. And we're skeptical of what you're doing and where you're going. So
everybody's dangerous, aren't they?
Totally. And
yeah,
that was my first interaction really with the amount of fear that was being used to control my honest inquiry into differing perspectives. The next kind of vignette that happened was my best friend came out to me at Moody, which I didn't think anybody else was gay. And so that led me to come out to him. And we began this journey of wrestling with our sexuality and studying the scriptures and going to different mentors on campus together. And instead of reaching out to us with compassion and grace, because we were truly trying to live what Moody thought was right and be celibate and be whatever, we went to an ex-gay professor who then took our story and sent it to the entire faculty and said, you know that this Brandon guy and this other kid who also was on my radio show, you know they're already dabbling in heresy, and they've just told me that they struggle with same-sex attraction. So this is a fatal combination, and we need to do something about this. Which then led me to the third vignette, which is senior year, getting called into the dean's office the first day I got on campus. And they said, you need to stop your blog. We've canceled your radio show, and you need to start going to conversion therapy every week for the rest of this year if you're going to graduate, because you need to prove to us that you align with our theology and that you're striving to be the kind of Christian we want you to be. And over that year, I continually kept bumping into these professors and these mentors who quite literally demonized me and my friend, and would talk about us in classes as heretics. And like, unbelievable. My senior year, I remember walking to lunch and a student yelled heretic across the cafeteria. Like, that's the kind of environment Moody was cultivating. And it was one of, let's suppress and oppress anybody who's thinking differently and shame them as much as we can into conformity. And I became so convinced that that was not the way of Jesus. That was not reflective of the God who casts out all fear. And yeah, those kind of three moments, two related to sexuality and one just related to asking questions, is what revealed to me, I think, the fatal flaw of evangelicalism, which relies on indoctrination. And if you begin to question any aspect of that, the entire system falls apart.
Well, and what I find really fascinating here is, you say that they began calling you heretics and all this other, nonsense. You were still in the process of trying to conform. Yeah. Like you would, come out to this professor and, probably quote unquote profess your sin, right? Like you were trying to, rid yourself of this and walk away from, what all these things that they say, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they want. I mean, that, and apparently that's what this guy had gone through as well. Right. Yeah. And so it's it's the hypocrisy for me, right? Like it just doesn't even register. So, so I assume you did actually, you ended up graduating from Moody. Is that correct?
I did, by the grace of God. I'm not sure how or why they let me walk across that stage, but I did.
Did you do the whole year of conversion therapy?
I did. And
wow,
what my conversion therapy experience was a lot different than a lot of other stories you'll hear. I'm really grateful that the professor, she was an ex-lesbian that was walking with me every week, she was actually pretty progressive, like politically, and was just conservative in this area. And so we actually formed like this incredible relationship. And though I think the overall message that I was being given was harmful, I was aware enough at that time, due to all of the kind of fear-based and fear-mongering that Moody had thrown at me, that this was all kind of BS. And So I really wasn't buying into it. And I think that protected me from the deep damage that could have been done if I would have, at that point, went all in.
Yeah.
What do you think about people in that space of, well, we don't hate gay people. In fact, some even support, like, you can get married in civil marriage, but we still know it's sin. Like, I mean, do you have grace for people in that space? I'm less and less having grace for that. How do you feel about that?
So the first thing I did after graduating from Moody, someone from the Obama White House reached out, and someone from Log Cabin Republicans reached out, and they asked me to be the spokesperson of an organization called Evangelicals for Marriage Equality, which advocated for that very position. And so at some very deep level, I've been where so many of these people are. I see this on TikTok every time I log on. There are people all over the spectrum, from being like, you all are demonic and evil because you're gay, to it's a sin, but we're welcoming of you. I can empathize with them, but I think I'm also with you, Paul, that though I'm a bridge builder at heart, the time for bridge building in the church on this particular issue, I think, is past.
Yeah.
I think the church has had enough time, and there's enough evidence, and there's enough good theology out there that if you're not willing to be engaging in this conversation in your communities and be actively trying to figure out how to reduce harm at very minimum, then I have no tolerance for that. And that's one of the hardest messages I've had to figure out how to communicate over the past few years is, yes, I'm radically inclusive, and I believe the gospel is radically inclusive, and I don't want to include the non-inclusive. I don't think you can bring exclusive people into inclusive spaces and those spaces remain truly inclusive.
I just preached about that. I just preached about that like a couple of weeks ago. That is such a great statement, because I was saying that we are experiencing love and growth through division. Because, I was talking about how Jesus says, I didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. I came to bring division. Like, I will divide houses, amongst themselves or whatever. And so I think we are honestly experiencing inclusivity through division. And that's such a great point, Brandon, for sure. And so, you talk about the Obama White House reaching out. I think I would be remiss if we didn't mention, even in the 2008 campaign, Obama and now President Biden both were on record saying that they believe, still very firmly that, marriage was only between a man and a woman. Like they actually were asked that in debates and made that statement in 2008. Obviously, the White House, I think, became more progressive over time. And then now President Biden has very clearly changed his stances on that. When they reached out to you, do you have any idea kind of where they were in that process? Were they still very much like, we want you to have rights, but we're saying like you're morally wrong? Is that kind of where they were coming from?
Yeah. So this was 2014. So second term Obama, they had already been very progressive. It was pretty clear marriage equality was going to happen.
Was it Michael Ware?
No, it wasn't. I know Ware. Interesting guy.
Yeah.
But
I was curious.
Yeah. And the person who reached out while he worked for the Obama White House, this project was not an official project of the White House. So it was kind of this independent, progressive Christian and this Log Cabin Republican evangelical Christian saying, they were more interested. And I still think this was a good project in some regards. Like, the political debate had bypassed a majority of people in the pews. And we had to get some way to begin having conversations with evangelicals in the pews about marriage equality that moved them ever so slightly forward. And that was kind of the mission of the organization. But that lasted for honestly about a month before we had people like Brian McLaren on our board, who had just married his gay son. And it became very progressive very quickly. But and the marriage equality was decided on like 6 months later. So short-lived organization, but it was in that organization when the first thing we did was I publicly wrote an op-ed in Time Magazine about why we were launching this organization. And the next day, the Southern Baptist Convention took out another op-ed in Time Magazine condemning me and us as heretics and anti-gospel. The next day, Al Mohler did a whole radio show on us and how we were evil. And it was just this avalanche of, after just going through Moody, and now all I'm advocating for publicly, I'm straight, that's what I'm telling people, and I'm saying it's a sin to be gay, but gay people deserve civil rights. And even that was too much for this world that I was a part of, so much so that they had to condemn me publicly and warn the church about me. And that season of life was really my final straw with the evangelical world, because it was like, there is no redeeming this. This is not a religious movement anymore. This is clearly a political movement. And it's not about the truth. It's about not letting anyone have a divergent viewpoint, because God forbid somebody thinks a different thought politically than us. And then we lose the power we have over the millions of people in the pews.
So you say, and you are still identifying as straight. So when did you come out officially?
Yeah. So in that journey, right before I graduated Moody, I got my first book contract with a conservative publisher that was trying to go more progressive. And so they reached out and said, can you write a book for progressive evangelicals? Like, talk about your journey from fundamentalist to progressive. Did that. And after we launched Evangelicals for Marriage Equality, I turned in my book manuscript. The publisher was like, we love it. This is great. And then the next day they called after I submitted it and said, hey, we just heard from the CBA, the Christian Bookselling Association. And they said, if you can't sign this statement that condemns homosexuality as a sin, they're not going to put your book out into the market. And at that moment, my theology had progressed enough and I knew I was gay. I said, I can't do this. And they canceled the book deal. A week later, Time Magazine reached out and said, we heard about this happening. We also heard that you're gay, because I was living in Washington, D.C. and started exploring my sexuality. And the reporter basically said, we want to cover the story, but we're going to tell the full truth. And so we're going to give you a few weeks to figure out what you want to do personally about your sexuality. And then we're going to publish this story. And the next day, the story went live on Time Magazine. And
literally the next day?
Literally the next day.
God.
Wow.
And
so you were kind of outed like every step of the way. You never had control over your story.
Yeah. I mean, I remember standing on 14th Street here in DC, calling my mom on the phone saying, you're going to go on Facebook tonight and see this article. And it says, I'm gay. Like, I just want you to know that. And so it was, I don't have any ill will towards that reporter. It was truly, I think it was her editors who pushed the story forward because it was newsworthy.
So you don't think she lied? You think that they just pulled the trigger above her head?
Yeah. Because I still know the reporter, and she's a wonderful progressive woman of faith. But yeah, I think it was just a weird moment. And in the week that happened, I was deeply traumatized because, I mean, I was getting phone calls and emails from every professor at Moody, like laying into me. And my childhood pastor is saying, you're done. You're an apostate. But a week later, like a couple weeks later after this happened, I was really grateful for this process because I never had to go through what so many LGBT people have to go through, which is the weird, awkward coming out to everybody and figuring out how to do that. The Band-Aid was ripped off for me. It was out there in public. And I was like, here we are. Okay. So on one hand, I'm grateful, but yeah, it was traumatic in the moment.
It's interesting too, because I mean, we all get hate from Christians on our social media and stuff, but there seems to be a special hatred for you out there. I don't know what is it that you attract all the Theo bros to like come at you so hard?
And
how do you handle that?
It's a weird thing. It really is. That first of all, the fact that the evangelicals feel the need to take all of us seriously. All of us have had something, us quote it somewhere, or somebody writing something about us, not just TikTok commenters, but like the Christian Post will do a story if I say Jesus isn't the only way on TikTok. And it's like, what world are you living in where this is the thing you need to cover? I think it shows that there's this true level. They see us all with growing platforms on TikTok, realizing that young people that are leaving their churches are finding folks like us. And they're really scared. And the young people who are in those churches, who are hearing their youth pastor say, deconstruction is evil, stay away from these false teachers on the internet, they're just bringing back that fear and showing up in our comment sections. And I think for me, just because for the past in the past 10 years, I had very deep connections to the evangelical world, and like was hanging out in the Willow Creek circles, and like I felt like there was a trajectory for me there. I feel like that really scares people on my page to see how quickly my journey went, and how quickly I went from evangelical bro to gay, progressive, agnostic. Jesus isn't the only way because God loves everybody. Like, and fear makes people do some really horrendous things, as we all know. And I think we see that all on our pages. And you're right, Paul. I feel like they just love spending hours saying ridiculous BS on my.
Well, you've got two options when the car fishtails, right? When you hydroplane, it's like you can either go off the road and crash, or you can lean it, steer into the curve a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think hearing your journey is like you started to see the pinholes, in the dam a little bit, and it was like, well, instead of just running away from this and going no, like we start picking at it, right? And I think that's where the two lanes diverge, kind of the split is that so many of those folks that I think are so combative it's not that they don't see the problems, it's that they want to fight back and pretend the problems don't exist because they know if one piece comes out, the whole thing is coming down.
Absolutely.
And
I also love that
really
that you're like, you checked all the boxes of what evangelicals tell you to do. Go to Christian school, like stay faithful. Yeah. Like you didn't go to some state school and get indoctrinated by a liberal professor.
Yeah.
You were at Moody Bible Institute.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't go to those state schools.
That's the thing is that, and I honestly mean this, and of course, folks never believe me when I say this on TikTok, but like, it was studying the Bible and studying theology that pulled everything apart for me.
Yes.
It was seeing the negative, bad fruit being borne by the people in Moody and in my evangelical community, and going back to the Bible and like doing the real research. And I've been really honored because of podcasting and stuff for my entirety of my life thus far, my faith journey thus far. Like I've gotten to sit down and talk to N.T. Wright about why evangelicals' versions of Paul are really inaccurate. And like very early on, those kind of conversations started exactly what you're saying, poking holes in the very foundation. And the slippery slope is real. Once you start sliding, it doesn't stop. But I think what evangelicals don't understand is that it's not a slippery slope to hell. It's a slippery slope towards liberation. It's a slippery slope towards truth and freedom and love. And
it's a slide. It's like, yay.
Well, they would call it backsliding. They would literally call it backsliding.
No, I'm front sliding.
But I'm head first. I see exactly what's in front of me.
Yeah.
And you have an interesting term. I don't know if you still call yourself, but you're an agnostic Christian. Is that still what you call yourself?
Yeah, that's where I'm at these days. Just because, like, once I lost my evangelical label, and that was probably in the beginning of the Trump era, and I clung on to progressive Christianity and still like resonate with that label to a degree, but Christianity is the language I use. It's the faith I understand because of the world that I've grown up in. But I have no illusion that God is limited to Christianity, or that I can't gain wisdom and insight and a more meaningful life by being open and learning from different paths. And so I want to be distinctly Christian because that's how I know how to talk, and that's how I think about God and theology. But I'm open to the fact that all of this could be wrong. We could all be wrong about all of this, and probably are. And I think that's the posture, even scripturally, that we're called to take. That is what it is to be humble before an infinite God, is to say, all of our words are going to ultimately fall short, but it's by grace that we're saved. Like, it's not about us having the right answers. It's not about us figuring this all out. It's about us trusting that if there is a God, that God is love, that God is gracious, and that God will redeem and restore all of us in the end. And that kind of faith has led me to say, I don't know, and I don't really want to know. I'm happy not knowing and being open to explore.
I think that's really great because it kind of reminds me why I think that evangelicals give more power to Adam than they do to Jesus in their own narrative, right?
Yeah.
Like they say that this guy made the choice that doomed all of humanity forever, but that Jesus would come as a perfect, blameless sacrifice in that tradition, but it's only good enough for those who hear it and believe it and then live it out in the appropriate channels.
Except they blame Eve. They don't really blame Adam.
Fair.
No.
It was the woman's fault.
Then there's the whole misogyny wing. But I've always found that fascinating, because I mean, we'll hear them say this. I've said things like this from the pulpit in my conservative days, Jesus, the second Adam, we use that terminology. And I just find it really fascinating that they believe that Adam could just, and Eve and whatever, could just absolutely destroy humanity in one bite, and that Jesus can come and live this incredible life, teach all these incredible things, get executed by his government, raised from the dead.
If he had had an AR-15, that wouldn't have happened, though, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren Bobo. She is a gun ho. But
bringing it back.
Yeah.
Can the title of this episode be Gun Ho for Brandan Robertson?
Gun Ho for Brandan Robertson. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I'm Gun Ho for Rev B-Rob.
B-Rob?
Rev B-Rob.
I mean, it does feel sometimes like reading the Bible is reading somebody else's mail, like literally when some of the Paul's letters, but isn't this definition of God an ancient Bedouin farmer's attempt at explaining God? And aren't we crazy to be confined into that, Brandan?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so mind-blowingly brilliant about the Bible and this faith, and why I've dedicated my life to it. I'm starting a PhD in the Bible next month, and I'm still all in, because the more I study what this book is and how fascinating it is, and the people who wrote it, and what they were thinking, and how their theology evolved over the course of the 3,500 years that Scripture was written in, it's super fascinating. But the thing that I've become obviously very sure of is that this isn't an inerrant text of people declaring what God actually is. It's exactly as you said it is. It's people giving us their best understanding from their perspective of who God is, or who they want God to be. I talked a lot recently on TikTok about the book of Revelation, and this is not a text about the future of humanity. This is a text of an oppressed group of people in the late 1st, early 2nd century, desiring God to come back and kill their enemies and redeem them from their oppression. That's what you're reading. We're not meant to take that as a literal thing that's going to happen in the future. But when you think about John on the Isle of Patmos writing to a group of churches in Asia Minor that are literally being threatened with death, of course, a good pastor would be like, Lord, come and destroy this empire and save these people and throw them into a lake of fire. That context, that historical perspective, makes it such an interesting text and a relatable text. But most evangelicals never are free enough to actually engage with the historical reality, and they can only see it as a text that's literally true about the future, applying to them. And it's a really narcissistic reading of the Bible, and it limits, I think, the beauty and the depth of what the Bible is for us.
I mean, evangelicals struggle to put the Bible in biblical context, much less historical and cultural context, right? And that is absolutely, I think, the three major criteria to reading Scripture well is biblical, historical, cultural context every single time. And so, man, I think that's fascinating. I do have one other question. So you said you're getting ready to start your doctorate. I'm curious where that's at, if you don't mind sharing, and then also where you did your master's degree.
Yeah, so I'm doing my PhD at Drew University in New Jersey. So I'm moving to New York City next month. I'm going to be commuting out there to do that. And then I did my first master's in theology at Iliff School of Theology. And then I did a political science master's to give some practical nature to that theology at Eastern Illinois University. So
nice.
Okay, can I actually ask one more question? We have a comment here. Can you talk about how the Bible doesn't address sexual orientation or gay people specifically? And this is something that I actually get asked a lot, and I've talked about it before, but I know there are people out there that that want to be affirming, like Christians that want to be, but they're hung up on the indoctrination of like literal interpretations of mistranslations and what have you. So
Yeah.
What say you?
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, this is super simple. On the other hand, it's really complex.
Mhm.
First, it starts with what is the Bible? Okay,
Yeah.
if we can all agree that the Bible is not the inerrant word of God dropped out of heaven, and so every word needs to be literally true for all time, for all people. That's the foundation I'm starting with. So I have no problem conceding that if you were to take the Apostle Paul out of the first century and drop him into 2022 America, he'd probably be homophobic, because that was the world that they lived in. He was a hyper-patriarchal culture. But the Apostle Paul, for instance, I just did a video on this yesterday. There are 17 words in the Greek language for homosexuality or lesbian sex. And Paul uses none of those words. They were common words. They're found all throughout ancient Greco-Roman literature. Never do they appear in the Bible. Paul creates a word, arsenokoitai, based off of Leviticus 18:22. And whatever Paul is describing is clearly not one of those 17 words, whatever they were referring to, which they had words for gay marriage, because that existed in first century Greco-Roman world. They had words for gay sex. They had words for exploitation. They had all different things. Paul's not talking about any of that. He's talking about something wholly different, arsenokoitai. And so the question then is, what does arsenokoitai mean? I think it's pretty apparent. If you read Leviticus 18, the entire chapter, 18 verse 1 starts off saying, essentially, God is speaking to Israel saying, don't be like the Canaanites. Don't be like the Egyptians. They're pagans. They worship false gods. Here's a list of things that they do that you can't do if you want to stay consecrated to me. And so the rest of chapter 18 in Leviticus is a list of things that pagans do that Israelites aren't supposed to do. Right before the verse that says a man shall not lie with a man as with a woman, it says don't sacrifice your child to Molech. So clearly the context is idolatry. It's not consensual same-sex relationships. It's not marriage or even gay sex generally. It's referring to a very specific practice. And that's kind of how I would handle the clubber passages. The other side that I would say just real quickly is I do think that there are queer people in the Bible. I'm not a super fan of like reading David and Jonathan as a inherently queer story, but we do know that like the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts chapter 8 would fit somewhere within our queer definition in our modern world. Eunuchs, there's a wide array of what a eunuch was, and each eunuch was different. But there's a lot of, in my book, Gospel of Inclusion, I have some first century sources that describe eunuchs as essentially gay men at a gay bar today. Like you read the ancient text and it's like, that sounds like what I experience when I go to my gay bar here. It's like a bunch of a little bit more effeminate, fun-loving folks that got to form their own communities in ancient Rome. And so all that to say, there are these few moments in the Bible where I think genuinely queer characters appear, and they're never condemned. They're always blessed. They're always welcomed into the Jesus movement. And I think
there was this guy named Jesus who said some are born that way.
Exactly. I mean, that's the point, right? Like, Jesus expanded the definition of eunuch for everyone.
For everyone. Exactly.
And I really love your explanation there, because you know I know there's this move of like the Bible's mistranslated, and I think there's an argument for that. But I always say, like, we still have to deal with the church's historic stance against homosexuality. And so for me, it comes down to, how did Jesus interact with the outcast, with the marginalized? And I would say the LGBTQIA plus community is that outcast, marginalized community of the evangelical and Christian church today. And Jesus would have been right in the midst of them saying, now I'm with these guys. And the way you look at them, even if it agrees with your scripture and your belief system, is wrong. And so I think we can look at it from that perspective as well.
Right. And just to note, like, nobody would agree with ancient Christian standards for sex and relationships. Paul and the earliest church fathers said marriage is a sign of weakness. And if you're getting married, it's only because you don't know how to control your lust. They believed everyone should be celibate. There's not a church in the world that teaches everyone should be celibate. Like,
it wouldn't be a big one.
Right. I don't buy this that you're a historically Christian movement or whatever these people want to say. Like, that's just not true, you are injecting your own reading of history into the church to get the kind of theology you want out of it. Yeah.
Cool.
Good stuff. All right, should we hit our mid-roll, guys? And
Yeah.
I don't know, do we want to come back and hit our last segment, or do we want to talk patriotism in the church? What do you guys think?
I think we could talk patriotism for a few moments.
All right.
Absolutely. Roll the 3/4 roll. It's not really a mid-roll tonight. It's more of a 3/4 roll. Loving evangelicalish? Follow us to catch all the latest content and encouragement. You can check us out on TikTok by following @evangelicalish or subscribe on YouTube by searching evangelicalish. That's evangelical with an ISH. And don't forget to catch our live streams each and every single Wednesday night on YouTube at 9 Eastern, 8 Central, and 6 Pacific. And now back to the Evangelicalish podcast.
Yay, welcome back. I forgot I'm leading this.
You're up,
I'm
April.
leading this segment. It's been so long and we had such a good conversation.
That's
So patriotism in the church, obviously July 4th just happened. All of us have called out Christian nationalism in very recent times. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of our faves, in a press conference yesterday, I don't know. She was talking about the shooting that happened at the 4th of July parade on Sunday and was talking about it being like this conspiracy, like that why didn't any shootings happen during Pride Month, but suddenly they're happening during MAGA Month. So she referred to July as MAGA Month. Did y'all see that?
MAGA month?
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
she was saying it's like some conspiracy to try to get Republicans to be swayed on the gun issue.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
Insane.
I mean, you can be a terrible person, but being that dumb while doing it it really offends me. She just offends
But also,
me
like, people actually died.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
just
the
playing it
thing.
off.
Well, that's the whole Q movement. I mean, even back to, was it Sandy Hook? Like, they denied that kids died there. Like, it's ridiculous. And just a funny side note, I was with Marjorie Taylor Greene last week at the airport in DCA, and it was everything within me to keep my Holy Spirit composure and not say something to that woman. But,
See, that's proof right there. You got Jesus in you.
That's
that
more
is some
Jesus
solid
than I've got.
yeah.
And Marjorie's alter ego, Lauren Boebert, the other day saying she's just sick of this separation of church and state stuff. We just need to get rid of that stuff. It's just a stupid letter. And we just had the 4th of July weekend where I put out on my social media, like, if you sang My Country 'Tis of Thee in your church this weekend, you don't understand who Jesus is. And I don't know, Brandon, let's start with you. What do you think of patriotism in our churches today?
Yeah. I mean, again, I came from a church, at least, that was very patriotic, that really made Christianity a religion of the American empire. And I don't see how anyone could do a cursory reading of the Gospels and come out thinking that endorsing empire or mixing Christianity with empire is a good idea or is the way of Jesus. And I'm a proponent of what some consider a conspiracy theory, but I think Constantine and the Roman Empire really screwed up Christianity. And I think it's been really hard to recover Christianity in the past 1800 years. And we're just re-solidifying this imperial takeover of this subversive movement that was anti-empire. And America is the Roman Empire of our modern world. Jesus would have been against the military industrial complex. He would have been against the ways that we colonize the world and gain our power and hold it above other marginalized peoples around the world. And so I just don't see, from that perspective, how a church would endorse any country, let alone the empire that is dominating the world in our modern day.
I had a slew of comments in the last couple of days because I was very blessed to be featured on Libs of TikTok this week.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well
Thank you so
done.
much. Yeah.
Well done.
And so I had a bunch of people coming to, I literally on the 4th of July, I posted a picture in my shirt that says, "For God so loved the world," into Christian nationalism. And the amount of comments that I got on that, one of them was saying that Christianity has only ever survived because of nationalism. And like, people are so stupid. I was like, the early church literally was not nationalist at all. They were anti-nationalist. And then like just the false dichotomy of, I can't tell you how many people were like, oh, you're against Christian nationalism, so you want satanic nationalism. Like, it's so black and white, one or the other. Like, no, I don't want any nationalism. Like none.
Well, but you said the key thing, right? Like you said the part that matters. If their theology is not black and white, if it's not good versus evil, if it's not, the white hat versus the black hat, John Wayne style, right? If it's not those things, then they have to address the pinholes, the slippery slope, the slide head first or backwards, whichever you prefer. They have to address all those things. Yeah. So as long as they can keep the division and the line in the sand to be us versus them, evil versus good, those things, then it's going to continue to be that. And so that's the reason it's like, what do you want it to be? Satanistic nationalism or, devil worship America?
I mean, truthfully though, the satanic tenets are actually really good, like from the Satanic Temple, and they don't actually worship Satan, which I always thought they did, because that's what they taught.
That's what they teach you.
They literally are just trolling Christians.
They are.
They are kinder. Like their tenets are actually like love thy neighbor, and it sounds a lot like Jesus, actually. Like just a little sidebar.
Sounds a lot like Jesus.
I used to say in our circles, if being a good Christian means you're anti-abortion, anti-gay marriage, and anti-President Obama, who was president at the time, then then Al Qaeda are the best the best Christians on the planet. And my wife always said, if you ever say that from the pulpit, I'll get up and leave church. That day, but it has become this idea, like say, unraveling our theology is unraveling our patriotism, to see how intertwined that is. And even in Jesus saying, give to Caesar what's Caesar, give to God what is God's. I think he was talking to nationalistic religious people who believed God's priority was to make Israel great again, and that God's plan on earth could only exist if Israel was the economic and military power of the world. And I just don't understand how we miss it. I mean, I think it's like exceedingly clear that Jesus would not be in favor of this Christian nationalism and patriotism in the church. And so I never would even allow an American flag in our church. And it's not that I hate America and I'm not happy to be American. I just think we're supposed to be pursuing a higher kingdom.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think people have a hard time wrapping their heads around. I was at the Capitol's 4th of July celebration on July 4th. And when the national anthem was sung, like I still am by and large grateful that we exist in this country, because we have this ability to do what we're doing right now. Like, I'm not anti-American. And I was taught as an evangelical that the kingdom of God comes first. The gospel comes first. I'm a Christian first. And that is what drives me to be critical of our country. It's what drives me to call out the injustices where I see it, and to highlight the brokenness of our system, and to see the harm we're doing around the world. Like, those two things need to be held in tension, because that's what it means to be a disciple. Jesus, with one breath, interacted with officials of the empire, tax collectors, and those folks, centurions, and all of that, and was critiquing the empire and trying to overturn the empire through subversive love. So that is what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
Well, and let's talk about what religious nationalism, radical religious nationalism, really gets you. Look at Afghanistan. Okay. Yep. There are photographs and videos out of Afghanistan in the 60s and 70s that you would think were from New York City. Like, I mean, you would look at them on their face and you would say, this is anywhere in the world except for the Afghanistan that we know in our world today. Women in, fashion forward clothing, mini skirts, and wearing what they wanted, obviously heads and bodies uncovered, and going to school. They were very proactive in educating women, and, the culture was very progressive at the time. But as radicalism seeped in and it became, radical religious nationalism, we now have this third world desolated, country that has just been trashed to ruins. And that's the direction, and I'm sorry if you're out there listening to this podcast and you're on the fence about, how you feel about this, this Christian nationalism and these rights being taken away in the name of Jesus and everything like that. I'm sorry, but we are headed in that direction. If Christian nationalism overtakes this country, we will just become another Afghanistan because Christian nationalists are the Taliban. They are the Taliban of the West. And I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings and that makes you feel, awkward on the inside, but no more. Like, we cannot continue to take rights away from people and treat, these marginalized communities like garbage and consider ourselves to be following after Jesus. We look nothing like Jesus. So this is terrorism. And we have a blueprint of what this looks like. And it happened in Afghanistan. And
it's unleashing something. Brandon, I saw your video about being called the F word, the pejorative for a gay person in DC. Do you feel like, it feels like these rulings by the Supreme Court and of course Trump and Trumpism are releasing people to their base instincts in these things.
Yeah, totally. We've seen people are feeling empowered all the way back to the Charlottesville rallies. And Trump did pull off the lid and give everyone permission to do and say whatever they want. And it is a scary time. DC, just what you're referencing, this is the gayest city in America, I would argue, by far. This is a very progressive city. And yet there is this, not just me getting called the F word in the streets, but racism that is now being seen and shootings that are happening that are racially motivated here in a very liberal, very progressive place. We're going backwards on some of these things. We are regressing. And I think it is imperative for all of us, especially those who want to claim the way of Jesus, to be pouring ourselves as much as we can in this moment to combating this, to taking responsibility for our people. I feel the personal responsibility for evangelicalism. I was a part of it. Yeah. I know it. I can speak to it. And I'm going to keep speaking out against it and doing whatever I can to make sure that it's dismantled. And that is the truth. I'm hoping it will fall to pieces.
I think that's my favorite insult that we all get is from current evangelicals that like to say, oh, you were never evangelical. You were never really a Christian. Like, no, that's why we're speaking out, because we know your freaking language, why you think, where it comes from, and that it's all fear-based. And the fear-based comes from the top that is just seeking control and power over the minions out there. I sang America Say Jesus on the Jim Bakker show, and I was not faking it at the time. So I was a nationalist. I didn't know it at the time, but I definitely was. And the cringe.
I'm with you, April. I used to think, why can't God be as good as Ronald Reagan? Like, man,
why can't God be as good as Ronald Reagan?
Oh,
wouldn't that be awesome? But I think all of this matters because history has shown, and certainly the Bible shows, countries that people groups that don't pay attention to the poor, the marginalized, the outcast, the foreigner, my friends, the foreigner, and the economically disadvantaged, like the widows, cease to exist. They get overturned. They get judged by God again and again and again. Yeah. And certainly if that doesn't happen in the United States, God's going to have to apologize to a whole bunch of people throughout history.
Yeah. It's a good word.
Crazy stuff.
So Jeremy, do you want to take the next segment with our Christian
I was getting ready to, just kind of with that pause, but if you want to finish your thought there.
My thought?
Yeah, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was literally just going to say that I went to a Michael W. Smith concert a few years ago, and then it could segue because it's also Christian music. It was like, I didn't really want to go to the concert. I just kind of went. But out of the entire concert, this was like 2019, out of the entire concert, all the songs about Jesus, all the worship songs, the song that got a standing ovation and the most hands raised in worship was his song about the flag still stands that he wrote about 9/11. And even me in 2019, I was so pissed. I was just like fuming in my seat. I was like, what are these people doing freaking surrounded by a bunch of nationalists. It's like, where was this for the song about Jesus 5 minutes ago?
Like, raise your hands in worship during Lee Greenwood's "I'm Proud to Be an American." Yes,
yeah.
Lord, yes, Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Lord.
So anyway, speaking of Christian music, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, I think that was a great segue. So many of us who grew up in the conservative, evangelical, fundamentalist culture, I know for a lot of us, I can speak for myself, we were only allowed to listen to Christian music and only allowed to listen to Christian artists. And sometimes even that was tethered down. I had to listen to a lot of Statler Brothers. The Gaither vocal band was a real popular.
Yep, that was my very first concert.
Come on, that's my jam right there.
Yeah. So, we were really stretching it with Mark Lowry's parodies. People felt a little uncomfortable with that, but we let that one slide because he sang with Bill Gaither, who apparently is like at the right hand of Jesus. And so we, we all kind of grew up in this very like conservative fundamentalist culture where we all had to take the music that we enjoyed and that we loved, and we had to trade it in for the Wish version that was Christian music style. And I will finish the intro with this. I literally had a youth pastor one time that said, "Bring me your secular CD," and that's my other favorite thing: secular versus Christian. Secular. He would say, "Bring me your favorite secular CD, and we'll throw that in the trash. But I will give you a CD from a Christian artist that you will love more." And so they had a CD trade-in on a Wednesday night.
Did you love it more?
For church? I absolutely did not. 1,000% did not. So full disclosure, I loved hip hop. I had a burnt CD of I had
Remember
a burnt
CDs.
Yeah. And this was all probably some really questionable bootleg stuff. But so I think my friends got a bunch of viruses, but they got some songs off LimeWire. So that was a thing.
Oh, I remember LimeWire.
And so I had a mixtape. It was like NWA, Dr. Dre, Tupac, Biggie, Eminem. I had like some really great hip hop. I loved hip hop. So
you got to listen to KJ52.
Yes.
I felt convicted. Oh, it's better than that. KJ52 was cringy, but KJ52 was like, he was the goofy white cringy guy. So we expected him to be cringy. Okay. So I took that. I felt convicted. I felt really heavy in my spirit because I was listening to this music and I shouldn't be. So on the way to church that night, I professed to my parents that I had this CD and I'd been listening to the secular rap music. And, they, of course, accused me. How dare you would listen to gangster rap, as they wanted to call it. Right. So I said, but I'm trading it in. I'm going to get a Christian artist. And so I traded it in. And in return, I got a group called Gospel Gangsters.
I've never heard of them.
And you shouldn't. Don't do it.
Greg Locke the lead rapper on that one?
No, but that is the most insane thing I've ever heard in my life. And his music is terrible. I put out some really bad music when I did some hip hop, but not as bad as Greg Locke. So anyway, so we all kind of had to get some stuff off of Wish as far as our Christian music. So I want to pose the question to the group. Okay. What was kind of that Wish trade out you had to deal with growing up? And then maybe also some Christian artists that maybe you didn't deconstruct that you actually still kind of have some appreciation for.
Well, so my parents actually allowed me to listen to secular music after a certain point. Like they just threw in the towel, but I wasn't allowed to go to secular concerts. So I really liked the Spice Girls. I actually wasn't allowed to have Spice Girls CD. They drew the line with them for whatever reason. But what I got in return, I was allowed to listen to Point of Grace. And so I went to a Point of Grace concert, and they literally they knew that they were the Wish version of the Spice Girls because they literally did a Spice Girls segment in their concert where they changed the words to some Spice Girls songs and made them Christian.
Yeah, of course they did.
And I actually loved it.
You want to be my savior, maybe?
Kind of Yeah. No, if you want to be a Christian, you got to get with my God, or whatever it was.
No. Shoot me
So yeah.
Lord.
So that was one of mine. Also, couldn't go to an NSYNC concert, but I was allowed to have NSYNC CDs. I loved NSYNC. But I could go to a Plus One concert. Did y'all remember Plus
They
One?
were absolutely the Wish version of NSYNC and
They
Backstreet.
were. They all knew they were. They were filling in the gaps for the parents that wouldn't let their kids listen to these.
No, they knew what they were doing. Christian music knew what they were doing. I think they stuck these 4 random dudes together. They were like, "You got your news, boys, but hold our beer, or actually, excuse me, hold our grape juice."
Our grape juice, yeah.
How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, see, I'm really nostalgic. I grew up with not religious parents, and so I could listen to whatever I wanted to. And so Christian music was a choice I made. And
nice.
Even to this day, I still I was just made a playlist on Apple Music of like Reliant K mixed with Twyla Paris, mixed with Little Hillsong, and like, you know what? Maybe a couple times a month I go off in my jamming to my evangelical days, because the one thing I will say about that is, cheesy as the music is, some of the messages that did get through in some of that music are really profound. And
yes.
And there's just, I think every one of those artists had one song that I still go back and listen to, and it's like, damn, that's really good. And so I'm generally nostalgic about Christian music. Even though I will acknowledge, I was a big KJ52 and went to a number of concerts.
Heck yeah. No. I appreciated him for what he did, right? He knew his lane, he ran in it, right? Yeah. I think he made I think the things that he was putting out were genuine. He knew he was goofy. He knew he would whatever. I can appreciate all that. It was cool.
I do still love Reliant K and DC Talk. Those two.
I just saw Reliant K was similar, which we probably all are familiar with.
Right, because they've progressed. I've said this, Reliant K was deconstructing before any of us.
Way before.
Some of their lyrics are like,
ooh, yes. Well, I mean,
go ahead, Jeremy.
Go ahead, Paul.
We when I was a kid, and I'm a little bit older than you guys, we had a 3-day conference on the evils of rock and roll, and they were talking to us about backward masking in what's the Stairway to Heaven? There was backward masking, or the backward masking in Beatles music, and all of these things. And so the last Saturday night of the conference, they said, tomorrow morning we're going to have a record-breaking service, because there were still records people were buying then, although my daughter is now big into buying records these days. But and so they said, bring your secular music and that evil demonic stuff. And so I brought a Barry Manilow cassette.
Good call. That, in all fairness, that should have gone.
And a Styx cassette, I believe I brought both to and so we destroyed Barry and Styx. So Styx was really evil, because that's a satanic river. But by the time I was in high school, my parents had kind of given up on parenting me, and I still say to this day, the greatest Christian concert I ever went to was seeing U2 in concert at Red Rocks in Colorado in 1982. Ooh, that was the best spiritual experience I ever had at a concert. And then for me, kind of like Brandon as well, when Vineyard music started coming out, that was, we were still singing hymns in our churches, and it's like, wow, listen to this. And so Vineyard music, and then Bethel music, as tough as those lines of Christianity are for me, and now as manipulative as I know that music can be used to be, there's something in my heart that still loves good Vineyard and Bethel worship music, no matter how hard I try to not.
I think there's something to be said for we can still appreciate good art, even if it comes with a, you take all right. So it's kind of the same, like, it's like Hamilton. Somebody dropped a Hamilton line earlier, right? I loved an interview that I saw with Lin-Manuel Miranda where he was like, we didn't create just like one overarching hero or villain through this story because everybody is very complicated. And history and people in general are complicated. And so I think we can appreciate good art and good music that brings us to the spiritual realm for what it is, while also remembering that some of those come from pretty disgusting places. And so I think we can appreciate that. But, a lot of folks in the comments have mentioned some really great ones, like
For him.
For him. Oh my gosh.
Jars of Clay. I think they were deconstructing well before any of us had ever talked about it.
Lauren Daigle.
Their first album was absolutely, still to this day, like a top 10 of all time, I think.
Can I say our youth pastor, one of my brother's favorite bands was For Him, and my youth pastor bullied him for it and would call him like For Her, like made fun of him. Was like, you listen to For Her.
That feels tasteless.
Whoa,
yeah, super. Whoa. He was a problematic youth pastor in many ways. Anywho.
And also, by the way, we when Christian artists are shit, we need to call them out and say that's shit. I saw somebody mention Stryper. I'm sorry, Stryper was shit. I'm sorry.
Can we just say like 90s Christian music was really where like Christian music kind of was a lot better. Late 90s, maybe into the early 2000s, but then after that, it just became this like very cookie cutter, like, and all of these things of like, they're clearly just trying to like create their own genre and manipulate people or whatever.
Right. Because CCM's pretty much turned into like mostly worship, like anything you hear from CCM, you hear in a church service on Sunday morning.
Well, and I loved the originality and the influences you heard in 90s Christian music, and nobody was afraid to say like, like DC Talk wasn't afraid to be like, we really liked the last Beastie Boys album. So, our next one is going to sound a little bit more, whatever, like rock. And so it was it was definitely like a different genre. I think DC Talk obviously was very progressive for the time. Switchfoot, Caedmon's Call, who is coming back, by the way. Oh gosh, his name just left me. Y'all know who I'm thinking of. Lead singer for Caedmon's Call, Derek Webb. Yeah. Right. Derek Webb is actually, he's I think Brandon, are you familiar with Derek?
Yeah. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know him well, but Derek Webb's been kind of in the progressive Christian circuit for like the past 8 years or so.
Well, and he's kind of, I think he kind of considers himself to be kind of in that similar space that you describe a lot, like that agnostic, through the Christian kind of lens a little bit. And so he's actually coming back with Caedmon's Call, and he's going to sing and that kind of thing. And so it's very interesting.
And by the way, didn't you go to a Gungor concert recently?
I did. I went and saw Michael Gungor. Music, yeah. It's interesting. As I was deconstructing, there were some Christian songs that I could still listen to that weren't triggering. And one of those was Beautiful Things by Gungor. And I found out he talked about it at this like really intimate show last week that he actually wrote that when he was in deep deconstructing. So him writing You Make Beautiful Things and like You Make All Things New was talking about how he was being made new through deconstructing. And then as soon as he told that story, like radio stations stopped playing that song. But I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like the deconstructing in him, like, or in me, saw it in him, and like I could still listen to it. And so, Also, Kevin Max is an ex-evangelical from DC Talk. Yes. So there's like these like little comfort people from the 90s music that, I don't know, that's just encouraging to know we're not alone.
All of those people are and were deconstructed. Like, I've met so many. Melissa Rogers was a part of Avalon. She's now a progressive Christian pastor. And then once Brian McLaren told a story that Bill Gaither and Gloria Gaither used to reach out to him all the time about like, we're with you. We are encouraging you to keep doing what you're doing. We just can't say it publicly. Like, I feel like that Christian music world was all a bunch of progressive folks just a little bit afraid of losing their record.
The only one that's like continually disappoints me is Michael Tate.
Yeah.
Who's
Michael
like
Tate
Trumper.
is extremely disappointing. Also, John Cooper of Skillet can.
Oh yes. Ugh,
he can bite me.
And what's her name from Zoe Girl?
Yeah, Alyssa Childers.
Yes, she.
Yeah,
no,
she also
like you've either deconstructed or you're like full on nationalist now, and
yeah, they both. I have reached out to both of them and said, hey, love the fact that you wanted to talk about me for like ever on your podcast. Real cool. Maybe if we sat down and like had a conversation together, like that would be great. And of course they don't want that, because then they would actually have to answer some like real questions.
They don't actually want to have a conversation.
No, because
if you continue to demonize.
And that was something that I think Brandon was mentioning that was so important earlier, and somewhere where we can kind of land the plane tonight, because I thought this was beautiful and it was early on in the episode, talking about, here he is at Moody going in, getting this like very like deep conservative theology, and then going out onto the street and connecting with humanity. The problem is, and the reason that the church has demonized people groups and kept them at arm's distance, and they don't want to have conversations, they just want to be talking heads. The reason for all of that is because if you ever put humanity with people that you don't agree with or don't see eye to eye with, then you're going to have to reconcile with the fact that they are just as much loved by God as you are, and he just as much cares about them as he does you. And that is something they don't want to do, because if they're just a massless face, a faceless mass of humanity, then you don't ever have to reconcile those things. But if you sit down kneecap to kneecap with somebody, it's really, really hard to hate them. And it's really, really hard not to understand where their heart and their perspective is coming from. That's exactly what happened to me. And that is ultimately one of the biggest things that turned me, on the LGBTQIA issue and my progression through that is that I connected with a lesbian couple that was married, who were super passionate about their jobs and their marriage and the people around them and serving their communities well. And I was like, holy shit, they love Jesus more than I do. And I couldn't unsee that. Like, there was no way for me to like, and here they are continually, and now I'm proud to serve a church that has so many folks from inside that community. And actually I took a week off here a couple of weeks ago, and our student pastor, who is a gay woman in a gay marriage, preached for me a couple of weeks ago. And I was super proud of that. And you know what? Here's the thing. You just can't unsee it. And they continue to show up and try to find faith community and like-minded community, even though they have been hurt time and time and time and time again, and kicked in the face time and time and time and time again. I don't have faith like that. And I'm trying to have faith as strong as theirs. And so I thought that Brandon just mentioning that about, leaving the doors of Moody and connecting with so many people of, different faith backgrounds and things like that. Just that's ultimately what it is. At the end of the day, when you boil it down, once you put humanity with people, that's where it changes.
Because you can convince people that LGBTQ people are demonic and have demons until they actually meet LGBTQ people and realize, oh my gosh, this person is super kind and I see Jesus in them, and there's definitely nothing demonic about this.
I think our friend JH is a part of
I recognize him as a TikTok troll.
Sad for JH. Right? You're going to have to hang out with queer people in heaven. That'll be too bad.
That's if you're there.
Let's not speak to their hell level.
Brandon, thanks for being with us. This was awesome and an honor to have you. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, first, thank you all seriously so much. These conversations are so important. And yeah, if you want to find out more, BrandanRobertson.com. I'm Brandon with an A, Brandan. And I've got books, podcasts, all of those things over there on LGBT Christianity and everything in between. So yeah.
Well, you're definitely an inspiration for us all. So thank you. And you're kind of that point of the spear in a lot of ways, and we're just running in your tailwind and very proud to sit and chat with you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. Seriously.
You bet. All right, guys, is that it?
I think that's it.
this is a new season, so we'll be back next week.
It is
Same
officially
time.
season 8. I checked. It is season 8, episode 1. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. 5 stars. Tell people why they should listen. Share it to somebody, and then come back next week. All right. We love you. Bye.
Bye.